On behalf of our family, we want to thank all of you for the prayers for our beloved mom, Nancy. We feel them, and we continue to believe that she feels them too. Our mom is a kind, faithful, loyal, fiercely loving woman of goodness and light. She's funny, spunky, and clever. She has grandchildren that adore her and crowd around her and cover her with kisses. She loves fun and adventure. She is a devoted friend. She is full of kindness and knowledge. Talk to her and you'll see.
The light is missing from our lives. Nancy is our mother. We are her children. She is our beacon. She holds fast to joy in all of life's circumstances. She chooses joy day after day, despite having already passed through great trials of pain and grief. We are always going to be merely human, just normal human people who need our mom. Mama, if you're listening, we need you to come home. We miss you.
Our mom is our heart and our home. She is 84 years old. Her health, her heart is fragile. She lives in constant pain. She is without any medicine. She needs it to survive. She needs it not to suffer. We too have heard the reports about a ransom letter in the media. As a family, we are doing everything that we can. We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you, and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us. Mommy, if you are hearing this, you are a strong woman. You are God's precious daughter, Nancy. We believe and know that even in this valley, He is with you. Everyone is looking for you, Mommy, everywhere. We will not rest. Your children will not rest until we are together again. We speak to you every moment, and we pray without ceasing, and we rejoice in advance for the day that we hold you in our arms again. We love you, Mom.
Love you, Mom.
We love you, Mom. Stay strong.
We love you, Mom. We love you.
This morning, the desperate search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie now entering its fourth day, with the Pima County Sheriff saying he's holding out hope Savannah's mom is alive.
We have nothing else to go on but the belief that she is here. She's present, she's alive, and we want to save her.
NBC News is aware of 2 reports of ransom notes sent to news organizations that reference Nancy Guthrie. NBC News has not seen those notes, and so far, no law enforcement agency has substantiated them. The Pima County Sheriff's Office saying it's also aware of the reports, adding, "We are taking all tips and leads very seriously."
The leads we've got coming in are critical to us. They're valuable, and we're sharing those with the FBI and others.
FBI agents are now working closely with local authorities. The sheriff's department says Guthrie had several cameras at her home, but it's still unclear if there's any footage from the overnight hours when she was believed to be abducted. They're also still trying to find any usable video from neighbors' homes.
To give you a sense, this is what the neighborhood looks like. Many of the homes are on these big lots set back from the street with all this tall, dry vegetation blocking any view of the road. There's also no street lights here, making capturing video in the middle of the night even harder.
President Trump weighing in on Nancy Guthrie's disappearance.
Would you commit to more federal agents like helping out on this?
Sure, I would. I'm going to call her later on. I think it's a terrible thing. I always got along very good with Savannah. Very unusual situation, but we're going to find out.
While authorities stress help from the public is key,
every lead and tip is important.
The NBC family and supporters across the country continue to stand by Savannah.
What you see on the Senate Today show is real. Those people are special people, and we're just heartbroken and devastated and praying for Savannah and her entire family through this difficult time.
And as you guys know, understandably, Savannah is no longer going to be traveling to Italy for the Olympics this week, where she was scheduled to host the opening ceremonies on Friday. She's obviously going to stay here in Tucson with her family as they continue this search. Guys, there's so much support for them here in the community. In fact, a local church is holding a candlelight service for Nancy tonight to pray for her safe return. Craig.
Amen to that. All right. Liz Court's force on the ground in Tucson. Starting us off again, Liz, thank you. I want to turn now to ABC's Tom Winter, who covers law and crime. Tom, good morning to you. Let's talk about what's transpired since we last talked 24 hours ago here on the set. In terms of the investigation, where are we now? And where does it need to go from here?
You know, Craig, we've gotten some new information. Unfortunately, it's not really new information that can help us advance the case today or help out people that are watching that want to assist with this case. You just saw in Liz's report as she was walking there in the vegetation. We're looking at it now. That's something that a number of people reached out to me yesterday and said, did they find any tire tracks? Was there anything that they were able to see behind the house? Because so far, there's been no sightings of any suspicious or unusual vehicles on any of the cameras from the other houses on the street where Nancy Guthrie lives. And unfortunately, the sheriff says, well, no, as a matter of fact, we have not seen any tire tracks surrounding this house. So that was difficult. There are some technological challenges that are occurring with the cameras that were at Nancy Guthrie's house. So that's making things more difficult as far as trying to find any video that may have occurred in those overnight hours when it's believed that she was taken from that residence.
As you know, there are reports circulating now of ransom notes to news outlets. Yeah. About Nancy. What should we make of that?
Right. So there were two notes that were sent to news organizations yesterday. They both referenced Nancy Guthrie. I have not reviewed those notes, but based upon what we're told, they have not yet been substantiated by law enforcement. So they haven't definitively tied those notes back to this case. It is something that's going to be investigated by the sheriff's office. Those notes have also been relayed to the FBI. So they're in the course of investigating those as well. They have some expertise as far as trying to track down that information. But sitting here this morning, there's nothing that leads me to believe that at this moment in the investigation, those are actually connected to what actually happened here.
Yesterday, we heard from the FBI agent who's in charge of that particular area in Tucson, and he said that they were specifically analyzing cell phone and tower data. What can they glean from that, Tom? What will they be looking for there?
So it's called FBI CAS, and the FBI sent in even more of their agents that are familiar with this technology, the Cellular Analysis Survey Team. Each cell phone tower puts out a signal, as we all know. And what they're going to do, and I'm explaining this in the most basic form, is they're going to look at all the signals that overlap Nancy Guthrie's house. And they're going to say which cell phones were connected to that house. They'll look at the neighbors. And so if you were my neighbor, Craig, and Chanel, if you were my neighbor, you would say, okay, well, we know that they're going to be there and they were at home at those hours because it was the overnight hours. But we have a number that's connected to the cell phone towers in this area. And you know what? That number's not usually there. Or why is that number there now? And all those types of things are going to look at, certainly as they get additional leads and additional developments. They're hopeful that they'll be able to then use that to maybe track any individuals that they're hoping to find and obviously get to a great outcome. I will say this. I have never covered a case in my entire career where somebody didn't know something, didn't know a family member, didn't know a friend who was responsible for this. Somebody always knows something. And you know what? You can not like us, you cannot like the government, law enforcement, whatever it is in your life that you've got an issue with. At the end of this case is an 84-year-old woman who wanted to spend the rest of her days going to church, spending time with her kids and grandkids. So now is the time to make that call. That is going to be critical in this case. I've never seen a situation where somebody didn't know something about who was responsible for the crime.
And the family maintains that if there is someone out there who has her, say something. No questions asked. Drop raw.
Absolutely.
Tom, thank you.
Thank you. Because some of them go on for quite a while. It's really dark. It's kind of creepy out here, actually. Chris, who's behind the camera, actually scared me a second ago. He pretended like there was someone down here. But you can see they basically go underneath a lot of the main roads, and they connect to different parts of these neighborhoods. And like I said, I'm told there's a bunch of them. But in this episode, I'm going to show you the latest with the search efforts. Also, something really interesting I heard about, could there be a deal worked legally so that someone who has information about where Nancy Guthrie is could come forward, someone who may have been involved in the kidnapping could come forward and give the information without dive into this episode, because if a deal could be worked out, could that, really move the investigation along in terms of what happened to Nancy?
The morning Nancy Guthrie disappeared didn't feel unusual at first. The air was still, the kind of quiet that settles over a neighborhood before the world fully wakes up. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs, no warnings, no reason for concern. But as the hours passed and calls went unanswered, that silence began to feel different, heavier. What started as a routine day slowly turned into something no one could explain. Friends and family began retracing her steps, clinging to the smallest details. When was she last seen? Who did she speak to? Each answer only seemed to raise more questions. The timeline felt incomplete, like pieces of a puzzle scattered too far apart to make sense. And then, just as uncertainty began to settle in, the story reached a wider audience. That's when Brian Entin stepped in. Known for digging deeper into cases others couldn't fully unravel, his involvement brought a new wave of attention. But this wasn't just another report. There was something different this time, something that suggested the truth might be closer than anyone realized. As he began reviewing the case, subtle details started to stand out. Things that had once been dismissed suddenly seemed important. New information surfaced, hinting at a direction investigators may not have fully explored before. A location, unclear, but specific enough to raise concern, began to emerge in the conversation. It wasn't confirmed, not yet, but it was enough to change everything. As this revelation spread, people couldn't help but ask, how was this missed? And if this new lead was real, what else had been overlooked? If you've been following stories like this, now's the time to stay connected. Like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes, awareness is what keeps a story alive when answers feel just out of reach. The chapter closes with a lingering thought, one that refuses to fade. What if the key to finding Nancy Guthrie wasn't hidden far away, but somewhere much closer than anyone ever expected? As the story continued to unfold, the focus shifted from what was unknown to what might have been overlooked. Brian Entin began retracing Nancy Guthrie's final known moments with a level of detail that hadn't been applied before. Every movement, every timestamp, every interaction was re-examined, not as isolated events, but as pieces of a pattern waiting to be understood. The timeline that once felt scattered slowly started to take shape. Surveillance footage, though limited, revealed subtle movements that raised new questions. A figure in the background, a vehicle that seemed to pass through more than once. Small details, easily dismissed at first, now carried weight. Witness statements were revisited too, and inconsistencies that once seemed minor began to stand out in ways that couldn't be ignored. What made this different was the perspective. Instead of asking what happened, Entin started asking where it might have happened, and why that place mattered. That shift changed everything, because as the clues were layered together, they didn't point in multiple directions anymore. They began narrowing toward a specific area. Not a confirmed location yet, but close enough to spark urgency. The idea that Nancy Guthrie could be connected to a place that had been right there all along created a quiet tension. How many times had people passed by it without knowing? How many chances had there been to notice something, anything, that could have changed the course of the search? The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about new evidence. It was about seeing old evidence in a completely different way. And just as that realization began to settle in, a new detail surfaced, one that made the emerging location feel less like a possibility and more like a direction. If you've been following this case closely, make sure you're part of the conversation. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because with every new detail uncovered, the story moves closer to something bigger. The chapter ends with a growing sense that the answers aren't scattered anymore. They're converging, and whatever lies at the center of it all may finally bring the truth into focus. The investigation no longer felt scattered. It was narrowing, slowly, deliberately, towards something that could no longer be ignored. Brian Entin leaned deeper into the emerging lead, focusing on the location that had begun to surface again and again in the details. What once seemed like coincidence was starting to feel intentional. The area itself didn't stand out at first glance. It was ordinary, familiar even, the kind of place people pass every day without a second thought. But that was exactly what made it so unsettling, because as the pieces came together, it became clear that this wasn't just a random point on a map. It fit too well into the timeline, too precisely into Nancy Guthrie's last known movements. Geographic patterns started to align. Distances matched up with the time gaps investigators had struggled to explain. The direction of travel, the lack of confirmed sightings beyond a certain point, it all began to circle back to this one place. And with every layer uncovered, the possibility grew stronger. This could be where everything changed. What made it even more compelling were the environmental details. Certain features of the location, its layout, its isolation at specific hours, the limited visibility from surrounding areas, added a new dimension to the theory. It wasn't just about where Nancy Guthrie might have gone. It was about where something could have happened without being immediately noticed. As this realization settled in, the emotional weight of the case grew heavier. Nancy Guthrie was no longer just a name in a headline. She was someone with a story, a life interrupted in a way that still didn't make sense. And now, the idea that answers might be tied to a single overlooked place made the search feel more urgent than ever. Halfway through this unfolding development, one thing became clear. This story was far from over. If you've been following closely, now's the time to stay connected. Like, subscribe, and share, because the next moments could change everything. By the end of the chapter, investigators were no longer just theorizing. Quiet preparations were being made. Attention was shifting toward action. And as that suspected location moved from possibility to priority, one question lingered stronger than ever. What would they find when they finally looked closer? The shift from theory to action came quietly, but it changed everything. What had once been a developing lead was now being treated with urgency, as attention locked onto the location that Brian Entin had helped bring into focus. The atmosphere surrounding the case grew heavier, charged with anticipation, as investigators moved closer to confronting what might be waiting there. The area didn't look any different than it had before. To anyone passing by, it remained just another ordinary place. But now every detail felt amplified. The ground, the surroundings, the stillness, it all carried a new meaning. Search efforts began carefully, almost cautiously, as if even the smallest disturbance might erase something important. Each step taken felt deliberate, every movement measured. As updates slowly emerged, tension built. There were no immediate answers, no clear confirmation, but there were signs, subtle, incomplete, but enough to keep the focus locked in place. The kind of signs that make investigators pause, take a second look and then look again. It wasn't certainty, but it was no longer doubt either. Meanwhile, public attention intensified. People who had followed the case from the beginning leaned in closer, waiting for clarity. The idea that the truth might finally be within reach made every update feel critical. And through it all, Brian Entin continued to report, bridging the gap between what was happening on the ground and what the world was trying to understand. But just as momentum seemed to be building towards something definitive, complications surfaced. Unexpected factors began to interfere, conditions that made the search more difficult, details that didn't line up as cleanly as hoped. The location still held significance, but it wasn't giving up its answers easily. Investigators were forced to reassess, to question whether they were looking at the full picture or only part of it. If you've been following this closely, now is the moment to stay engaged. Share this story, like, and subscribe, because awareness keeps the pressure on, and sometimes that pressure leads to answers. The chapter closes on the edge of revelation. The search hasn't stopped. The focus hasn't shifted. But something is about to surface. Something that could either confirm everything or send the investigation in a completely new direction. The moment everyone had been waiting for didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, piece by piece, as the investigation reached its most critical point. The location that had drawn so much attention, the place that Brian Entin had helped bring into focus, was no longer just a theory. It had become the center of everything. As search efforts continued, what was uncovered didn't immediately answer every question, but it changed the direction of the case in a way that couldn't be undone. The findings, though carefully handled and not fully revealed to the public, confirmed that investigators were no longer searching blindly. There was now a connection, real, tangible, and impossible to ignore. But with that progress came a new layer of complexity. Because even as the pieces began to come together, gaps still remained. Questions that had lingered from the very beginning refused to disappear. What exactly happened in that location? How did it go unnoticed for so long? And perhaps most haunting of all, was this the only place tied to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, or just one part of a larger story? The emotional weight of the case grew even heavier. For Nancy Guthrie's loved ones, this wasn't just about answers. It was about closure, about understanding a moment that changed everything. And while the investigation had moved forward, the reality was clear. Some truths take time, and not all of them come easily. Throughout it all, Brian Entin's reporting remained a steady presence, guiding the public through each development without losing sight of what mattered most: the truth. His updates didn't just inform, they kept the story alive, ensuring that Nancy Guthrie would not be forgotten. If you followed this story from the beginning, you already know how much every detail matters. So take a moment to like, subscribe, and share, because stories like this rely on people who care enough to keep watching, keep asking, and keep remembering. The chapter and the story closes not with a final answer, but with a powerful reminder. Mysteries like this don't simply fade away, and with every new detail uncovered, the truth moves closer, waiting, just beyond the silence, to finally be heard.